With Calgary, the biggest challenge is working around the fact that sometimes we have great weather, some days we have not so great weather.
It rained and it was windy and we had to cancel all the services on Monday.
We are hustling to get to these places, but we have to work around the weather. So when it comes to lawn care services, one of the most difficult parts is the scheduling. The reason for this is because we have to work with the weather. We are out doing different services that have different needs when it comes to the weather conditions. It can actually be too hot, it can be too cold, it can be too windy, and it can be rainy. But that's all right, because we are always taking into account things when we're doing scheduling. We are keeping our eyes on the schedule, and we know that when someone books with us, they do want us to get there as soon as possible. So we want to work with several things when we're doing the scheduling. Routing to make sure that we're doing you and your neighbor at the same time, but also just take into account weather. For example, if we take a look at today, and by the way, we live in Calgary, things are unpredictable all the time. We can have a hot summer day, but it can be snowing the next day. Today is an overcast day. That's actually quite a deal in our favor. However, it could rain later in the day. Now, one downside is that if we went and did a lot of weed control right now, it's possible, but not necessarily likely, that we're gonna get washed out for what we're doing. Fertilizer, we're fine. Aerations, we're fine. Weed control, we're a little bit on the fence. Today in particular, we are spraying because we do believe as long as the weed control can dry on the grass, it's gonna be okay and it's gonna be effective. However, if today was super sunny and plus 32 like we're gonna be seeing next week, it would actually be too hot to spray. And the last thing we wanna do is have damage happening to your lawn because we're putting down an application when it's not a reasonable time. If it's any windier than it is today, right now is probably borderline. Any windier would probably call off the weed control because we don't want the vapors to be spreading to flowers, anything that we don't actually want to control. We wanna make sure we're just taking out the weeds that you've hired us to do. Overall though, with Calgary, the biggest challenge is working around the fact that sometimes we have great weather, some days we have not so great weather, but don't worry, that's for us to figure out. We will be watching the weather and we will contact you if we ever have to make a quick change to schedule just because the weather may have taken a turn for the worse. I want to show you Kassy quickly here because Kassy is the scheduling queen. She's the one that really pulls it all together to make it all happen. Let's go see what Kassy's up to right now. I know that I got a call earlier today. Somebody was just noting that their weed control, it was taking longer than they anticipated for us to come by there. What are some of the things that can impact our schedule to make us perhaps delayed in some instances?
The biggest thing is just the weather, the rain, the wind, and the overly hot days too. Like since May 17th, we've had 9 workable spraying conditions for weed control in particular. Normally aerations can go off on a hot day or a windy day, but if it's super windy, even then your seed's spraying all over the place and not being put down properly. So if we want the best results, we gotta really work around the weather for our clients.
And Calgary's not very kind to us sometimes. As you know, the city changes things often, but we want to get to places as soon as possible. And we have 9 trucks every single day that are working overtime. Those guys, they roll out at 7 a.m. and they usually don't come back until 5 or 6. So we are hustling to get to these places, but we have to work around the weather. Can you talk a bit more about wind? I didn't know wind would be a thing when it comes to services.
Yeah, especially in the weed control, they're spraying like a mister. And if we want the mister to kill weeds, we want to actually spray it on the weeds. But if it's too windy, the mist will actually drift away from the weeds and go to like your garden beds or city property, which we're not legally allowed to be spraying anyway. So if you actually want your lawn to be effectively treated and have that weed control go right onto those weeds and not into your gardens, we can't spray on a windy day. That's 15 kilometers an hour or stronger that we can't cover.
And it's difficult too because we want to give people as much notice as possible when we're coming by, but at the same time, if we schedule them 5 days in advance, odds are we have to reschedule them because the weather changes all the time in Calgary.
Like yesterday, we were supposed to have a full day of work and it was fine. It was that way. But Monday was also supposed to be a full day of work and it rained and it was windy and we had to cancel all the services on Monday in the end to be rescheduled for a later date. And we had, the weather forecast said it'd be nice, but we go out there and it starts raining on us and it was not forecasted to rain. So we are working under the best we can do with what we're given, and we get to our people that have booked the longest for the longest as top priority, you know?
And what's kind of nice about it too, you know, people hire lawn care services because they don't want to think about their lawn. Well, they don't have to think about the weather either. We will watch to see what's going on. If there's ever a day where, you know, the day may have started out properly, but later on it gets too hot, it gets too windy, etc., we will reach out to the clients. We'll make sure that we tell them, hey, I know we had you scheduled, Marcus, today for your weed control, but, you know, unfortunately it's gotten a little bit too windy, so we're going to push your services into the next day or the following day after that, usually from there. So yeah, you know what? I guess the big part about the weather is that it can't be in our control. We have to focus on what we can control, which is communication to our clients and doing services when it's the best time for maximum effectiveness.